I stood in front of my bedroom mirror at the penthouse on Fifth Avenue, watching my reflection as I fastened the diamond earrings Marcus had given me last Christmas. The Valentino gown hugged my body perfectly, midnight blue silk that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and yet I felt like I was dressing for my own funeral. My hands moved mechanically through my hair, twisting it into an elegant updo, while my mind wandered to the encrypted email I had received 3 hours earlier from my lawyers at Whitmore & Associates, confirming the final transfer of shares. 51% of Apex Industries now belong to Meridian Capital Holdings, my private investment firm that Marcus didn't even know existed. 3 years I had spent with this man, 3 years of watching him build his empire on the foundation of my silent support, my late-night proofreading of his investor presentations, my connections that I pretended were just random coincidences. I could still remember the first time we met at that overpriced brunch spot in Tribeca, where they served $20 avocado toast, and everyone pretended to be more important than they were. He had walked in wearing a Tom Ford suit that was slightly too tight, confidence radiating from every pore, and when he sat down across from me at the communal table, I thought I had found someone who saw me as an equal. How spectacularly wrong I had been. The early days had felt like a romantic comedy written for streaming platforms. All stolen kisses in Central Park and late-night takeout from that Malaysian place on 6th Street that stayed open until 3 in the morning. Marcus would hold my hand across the table at Roberti's Steakhouse and tell me about his dreams of revolutionizing the tech consulting industry, making it more accessible to mid-sized companies that couldn't afford the big firms like McKinsey or Deloitte. I would listen and offer suggestions, drawing on the business knowledge I had accumulated during my years at Columbia Business School and my subsequent quiet investments in 17 different startups. But he always had this way of patting my hand and saying things like, "Sweetheart, you're adorable, but let me handle the business side." At first, I thought it was charming, this desire to protect me from the harsh realities of corporate America. But slowly I began to realize that protection was just another word for dismissal. When my grandmother Eleanor passed away 4 years ago, she left me her entire estate, a modest $12 million that she had accumulated through decades of smart real estate investments in Brooklyn, before the borough became the playground of trust fund kids and artisanal coffee shops. I never told Marcus the full extent of my inheritance, because even then, something in my gut warned me to keep that card close to my chest. Instead, I told him I had received a small amount, enough to be comfortable but not enough to threaten his perception of himself as my provider and protector. I had spent the last 4 years turning that $12 million into something that would have made my grandmother weep with pride. While Marcus thought I was shopping on Madison Avenue or getting overpriced facials at the spa in Soho, I was actually in conference calls with portfolio managers, analyzing quarterly reports from tech startups in Austin and biotech firms in San Diego, reading financial statements until my eyes burned and my brain felt like it might explode from the sheer volume of numbers and projections. Meridian Capital Holdings grew quietly, almost invisibly, investing in companies right before they took off, getting out before bubbles burst, playing the long game while Marcus played checkers and thought it was chess. My mentor in all of this was Richard Chen, a 60-year-old investment banker who had known my grandmother and who saw something in me that Marcus never could, the steel beneath the silk, the calculator behind the smile. Richard taught me to trust my instincts, to do my homework, to never let anyone see the full hand I was playing until I was ready to show all my cards at once. He told me once over coffee at that tiny place near Wall Street that serves the best espresso in Manhattan that the most dangerous player in any game is the one everyone underestimates, and I had taken those words and carved them into my soul. 6 months ago, I learned through my network that Apex Industries was in trouble. Serious trouble that Marcus was hiding behind increasingly elaborate excuses and fake confidence. His biggest client, North Star Financial Group, was threatening to pull their contract worth $8 million annually, and 2 of his key investors were getting nervous about the company's direction. I had sat across from him at dinner at Per Se, that restaurant where you have to book months in advance and where a single meal costs more than some people's weekly paycheck. Watching him order the most expensive bottle of wine like everything was perfect while I knew his company was bleeding money. That was when I made the decision. Not out of malice, but out of a cold, calculated understanding that I could either watch him crash and burn, or I could take control of the situation. Through a series of shell companies and intermediaries that would take a forensic accountant months to untangle, I began acquiring shares of Apex Industries from nervous investors who were looking for an exit strategy. Marcus had no idea because he was too busy playing CEO to notice that the foundation of his empire was shifting beneath his feet, like sand at Coney Island when the tide comes in. The gala tonight was supposed to be his coronation, his moment of triumph where he would stand in front of 200 investors, clients, and industry leaders at the Grandview Ballroom and announce the next phase of Apex Industries. The invitation had been embossed with gold lettering, the dress code was black tie, and the champagne being served was Krug Clos d'Ambonnet at $1,500 a bottle. I had helped him plan parts of this event, suggested the caterer who made those incredible crab cakes that melted on your tongue, recommended the string quartet that was probably playing Vivaldi right now in the corner, and he had thanked me with a distracted kiss on the forehead like I was a child who had drawn a nice picture. My phone buzzed with a text from David Chen, Marcus's business partner and the only person at Apex with any real sense, asking if I was ready for tonight. David had always treated me with respect, always asked my opinion on business matters, and I suspected he knew more about my capabilities than he let on. I typed back a simple yes and added a champagne glass emoji, then deleted the emoji because tonight was not about celebration, it was about reckoning. The car service arrived at 7:15, a black Lincoln Navigator that whispered through the Manhattan streets while I sat in the back seat reviewing my notes on my phone. I had memorized every word I was going to say, practiced my tone until it was perfect. That balance between warmth and steel that would make everyone in that room understand exactly who they had been underestimating. The driver made small talk about the weather, something about how October in New York was always unpredictable, warm one day and freezing the next. And I nodded along while my mind ran through scenarios and contingencies. What if Marcus tried to physically remove me from the stage? What if the investors sided with him out of loyalty? What if I had miscalculated and this all blew up in my face in front of the same people whose respect I would need to run the company effectively? But then I remembered my grandmother's voice, that thick Brooklyn accent that never quite left her even after 50 years of Manhattan living, telling me that fortune favors the bold and that fear is just excitement without breath. I took a deep breath, then another, feeling my heart rate slow and my mind sharpen into focus. The Grandview Ballroom was everything Marcus had promised and more, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors that reflected the light like a frozen lake under moonlight. I could hear the string quartet playing something classical and complicated, probably Bach or maybe Handel, and the air smelled like expensive perfume mixed with that particular scent of money and ambition that you only find in rooms where everyone is pretending to be more successful than they actually are. Marcus was holding court near the bar, surrounded by a cluster of middle-aged men in identical navy suits, all of them laughing at whatever joke he had just told like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. He saw me enter and his face lit up with that practiced smile, the one he used for clients and investors, and he excused himself from his admirers to meet me at the entrance. "You look stunning," he said, but his eyes were already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to, someone who could actually help his career instead of just decorating his arm. He took my hand and led me into the crowd, introducing me to people whose names I already knew because I had done my research, whose companies I had analyzed, whose weaknesses I had cataloged like a general studying enemy positions before a battle. Marcus introduced me to Gerald Hartley from Pinnacle Investments, an old money type whose family had been rich since before the Civil War, and when Gerald asked me what I did, Marcus answered for me with, "She keeps me sane and looks beautiful doing it." The men laughed and I smiled that smile I had perfected over 3 years, the one that said I was charmed and flattered when really I was calculating how quickly I could replace Gerald on the board once I took control. We moved through the room like that for an hour, Marcus collecting compliments and business cards while I played my role as the beautiful accessory, the trophy girlfriend who wore the right dress and said the right things and never ever challenged the men in their serious discussions about quarterly earnings and market penetration. I excused myself twice to the bathroom, not because I needed to fix my makeup, but because I needed to check my phone for updates from my legal team, and because I needed moments alone to remind myself why I was doing this, why tonight mattered beyond simple revenge. The second time I returned from the bathroom, I found Marcus in a circle of 5 investors, all of them holding drinks and discussing the future of artificial intelligence in business consulting. I approached quietly, catching the tail end of a conversation about machine learning algorithms, and I made the mistake of offering an opinion based on a white paper I had read from researchers at MIT. Marcus turned to me with that look, that particular expression that combined amusement and condescension in equal measures, and said, "Don't mind her, she's just a pretty face. Completely useless when it comes to real business." The circle of men laughed, not cruel laughter, but the kind of reflexive chuckling that happens when someone in power makes a joke at someone else's expense, and I felt something inside me crystallize into absolute certainty. I smiled, excused myself with a murmured apology for interrupting, and walked toward the balcony with my head high and my hands steady, even though inside I was screaming. The balcony overlooked the city, all those lights spreading out like a circuit board, millions of people living their lives completely unaware that in this room at this moment, something was about to shift in ways both large and small. I stood on that balcony for exactly 7 minutes, counting my breaths the way my therapist, Dr. Sarah Morrison, had taught me during those sessions at her office in Chelsea, when I first started questioning whether my relationship with Marcus was built on love or convenience. The October air had that crisp edge that reminded me of apple picking upstate, of cider donuts from those roadside stands that only accepted cash, of a simpler time before I knew what it felt like to be called useless by someone who was supposed to love me. Below me, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm, taxis honking and sirens wailing, and somewhere a street vendor probably selling those dirty water hot dogs that tourists loved and locals pretended to hate, but secretly ate after midnight when no one was watching. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the final documents one more time, the acquisition papers that had been filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission 3 hours ago, the voting rights that gave me complete control over the board of directors, the termination clause that I had my lawyers at Whitmore & Associates insert specifically for this moment. My grandmother's face flashed in my mind, that photograph from the 1970s where she stood in front of her first Brooklyn brownstone, wearing a pantsuit and holding a briefcase, looking like she could conquer the world, and probably did. She had written me a letter before she died, sealed it, and told my mother to give it to me on my 25th birthday. And in that letter, she had written that the world would try to make me small, would try to convince me that beauty and brains couldn't coexist in the same body, but that I should never ever believe their lies, because I came from a line of women who had built empires while men took credit. I turned from the balcony and walked back into the ballroom with my shoulders squared and my chin up, moving through the crowd with purpose now instead of drifting along in Marcus's wake like some kind of decorative satellite. I could see him near the stage, checking his watch and probably wondering where I had disappeared to, and I caught David's eye across the room. David gave me the smallest nod, so subtle that no one else would have noticed. But I saw it, and I knew he understood what was about to happen, because David had always been smarter than Marcus gave him credit for. The waiters were circulating with trays of champagne, that ridiculously expensive Krug that tasted like liquid gold and cost more per bottle than most people's car payments, and I took a glass even though I had no intention of drinking it because I needed my mind sharp and clear for what came next. Marcus stepped up to the microphone and tapped it twice, that annoying habit he had that made everyone in the room wince slightly, and gradually the conversations died down, and people turned toward the stage with their practiced expressions of polite interest. Marcus launched into his speech, and it was everything I had expected. All self-congratulation and carefully edited history that erased the contributions of everyone who had helped him along the way. He talked about his vision for Apex Industries like he had birthed it fully formed from his own head, never mentioning the countless nights I had stayed up with him editing presentations or the connections I had made through my grandmother's network that had led to his first 3 major clients. He praised his own innovation and his own risk-taking and his own brilliant leadership while I stood at the edge of the crowd feeling my heart pound against my ribs like it was trying to escape. When he got to the part about the company's bright future and exciting new developments, I saw several investors exchange glances that told me they knew more than Marcus realized about how precarious his position actually was. North Star Financial had already informed me through back channels that they would honor their contract with new leadership, but were prepared to walk away if Marcus remained in control. And I had that promise documented and notarized and sitting in my lawyer's office safe in case anyone questioned my authority tonight. Marcus raised his champagne glass and invited everyone to toast to Apex Industries and to the future, and that was my cue. I moved through the crowd with deliberate steps, my heels clicking on the marble floor like a metronome counting down to an explosion, and I reached the stage just as Marcus was about to continue speaking. I looked up at him and asked in a voice that carried across the room if I could say a few words, and I saw confusion flash across his face, followed by irritation, followed by that patronizing smile he always used when he wanted to humor me in front of other people. He handed me the microphone with a little flourish like he was being magnanimous, probably thinking I was going to make some sweet, supportive girlfriend speech about how proud I was of him, and I took it with both hands, feeling the weight of it, and the power of it, and the responsibility of what I was about to do. I started soft and gentle, thanking everyone for coming and complimenting the beautiful venue and the excellent champagne, building up goodwill and disarming the room the way a boxer might feel out an opponent in the first round. I mentioned how wonderful it had been to watch Apex Industries grow over the past 3 years, how exciting it was to see Marcus's passion for his work, how grateful I was to be part of this journey even in a small way. I could see people relaxing, see the investors settling back into their comfortable assumptions about who I was and what role I played in this ecosystem, and that was exactly where I wanted them before I detonated the bomb. I paused for a moment, letting the silence stretch just long enough to create a tiny edge of tension. And then I said that I had been called many things tonight, and I let my eyes sweep the room, landing briefly on the circle of men where Marcus had made his comment. I said I had been called a pretty face, and I had been called useless, and I had been called just a girlfriend, and now people were starting to shift uncomfortably because they could sense something coming, but they couldn't quite identify what it was. Then I dropped it, clean and simple and devastating. I said that what Marcus didn't know, what nobody in this room except my legal team and a few key advisors knew, was that 3 weeks ago, through my private investment firm, Meridian Capital Holdings, I had acquired 51% of Apex Industries. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the ice settling in people's drinks, could hear someone's phone vibrating in their pocket, could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears like drums before a battle. I watched Marcus's face cycle through disbelief and confusion, and then slowly draining horror as he began to understand what I was saying, as the implications started to sink in like water, seeping through cracks in a dam. I continued speaking, my voice steady and clear, explaining that the acquisition had been completed through proper legal channels, that all documentation had been filed with the SEC, that I now held voting control of the board of directors, and that I had already secured commitments from key investors to support new leadership moving forward. If you're enjoying this story of empowerment and justice, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our content. Drop a comment below saying something like, "Power moves only," and let me know what you think happens next. I could see faces in the crowd processing this information at different speeds. Some people already calculating their own positions and how to align themselves with the new power structure. Others still stuck in shock, trying to reconcile the woman they had dismissed as decorative with the woman now holding all the cards. Marcus tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water, and his hand reached for the microphone, but I stepped back smoothly, keeping it just out of his reach. I continued laying out the facts, mentioning that North Star Financial had confirmed their continued partnership under new management, that 2 additional major clients had expressed enthusiasm about working with Meridian Capital's broader network, that the board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning would formalize the leadership transition. It was all true, all documented, all completely legal, and watching Marcus realize he had no moves left was simultaneously the most satisfying and most heartbreaking moment of my entire life. Then came the moment I had rehearsed 1,000 times in my head, the image that had sustained me through long nights of doubt when I wondered if I was doing the right thing, or if I was just being vindictive. Marcus's hand, the one holding his champagne glass, started to shake, and then the glass just slipped from his fingers and fell, falling in what felt like slow motion until it shattered on the marble floor with a crash that made everyone jump. The golden liquid spread across the white marble like blood at a crime scene. And in that moment, I walked down from the stage, my heels crunching over tiny fragments of crystal, and I approached Marcus, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. I reached into my clutch, the vintage Chanel one that had belonged to my grandmother, and that I had carried tonight specifically for this symbolic purpose, and I pulled out my business card. Not the simple white card that said girlfriend or partner or whatever diminutive title people had assigned me in their heads, but the heavy cardstock embossed with my name and title, Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Capital Holdings, with our office address on Park Avenue. I held it out to Marcus, and I said in a voice that only he could hear, but that carried enough for the people nearby to catch the general sentiment, that effective immediately he was removed from all executive positions at Apex Industries, that his employment was terminated per the clauses in his contract that allowed for removal without cause by majority shareholders, and that he should consider this his official notification. His hand came up automatically to take the card, that muscle memory of professional courtesy overriding his shock, and when his fingers closed around it, I felt something inside me release like a pressure valve, finally opening after years of being sealed shut. I turned away from him and walked back toward the center of the room where David was already moving to intercept me, his face showing a mixture of respect and something that might have been relief. David had known for weeks that the company was failing, had known that Marcus's ego was writing checks the business couldn't cash, and while I hadn't told him explicitly about my plans, I suspected he had pieced enough together to understand that change was coming. The room erupted in noise, people talking over each other and pulling out phones to make calls and send messages, and I could hear Marcus behind me trying to say something, but his voice cracked and whatever words he had prepared died in his throat. Several investors approached me immediately. Guys like Gerald Hartley, who had laughed at Marcus's joke about me being useless, but who now wanted to assure me of their continued support, and who suddenly remembered that they had always thought I was quite intelligent, actually. I accepted their congratulations with grace, while internally marking down who had defended me in that earlier conversation and who had laughed, because I was going to remember, and when it came time to restructure the board, there would be consequences for the latter group, even if they didn't realize it yet. David shook my hand formally and said he looked forward to working with me, and I could see genuine admiration in his eyes, along with barely concealed relief that he wouldn't be going down with Marcus's sinking ship. Marcus made one last attempt to salvage his dignity, raising his voice above the crowd noise to say something about how I had betrayed him, how this was corporate theft, how he would fight this in court, and his voice had that edge of panic that men get when they realize the world doesn't actually revolve around them. I turned to face him one final time, and I said very calmly that everything had been done legally and transparently, that his lawyers were welcome to review the documentation, and that perhaps he should have spent less time underestimating people and more time actually running his company effectively. Then I asked security, the same security team that Marcus had hired to make his gala feel important and exclusive, to escort him from the premises, and the beautiful irony of him being removed from his own event by his own security people was not lost on anyone in that room. 2 weeks after the gala, I sat in my new corner office on the 42nd floor of the building on Park Avenue, looking out over Manhattan while my assistant Jennifer brought me my third coffee of the morning from that place downstairs that somehow made better espresso than shops that charged twice as much. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows that gave me a view stretching from the Empire State Building to the Freedom Tower, and on clear days like this one, I could see all the way to the Statue of Liberty, standing in the harbor, like a promise that America kept making to itself about reinvention and second chances. My desk was the same mahogany monster that had belonged to the previous CEO, a man named Richard Pemberton, who had retired to Florida to play golf and eat early bird specials. And sometimes I ran my hands over the wood and wondered how many decisions had been made here, how many lives had been changed by phone calls and signatures and handshakes that happened in this room. The transition had been smoother than I expected in some ways, and more brutal than I imagined in others, with half of Marcus's old team quitting in solidarity with him, while the other half quietly approached me, asking to stay on, and promising their loyalty like medieval knights swearing fealty to a new monarch. The first week had been a hurricane of meetings and conference calls and legal documents that needed my signature. My lawyers from Whitmore & Associates camped out in the building going through every contract and agreement that Marcus had signed to make sure there were no hidden landmines waiting to explode. David had stepped up as interim chief operating officer and proved himself invaluable, walking me through the operational details I hadn't been able to see from the outside, introducing me to key employees who actually did the work while Marcus had taken credit, helping me identify which projects were viable and which were vanity exercises that drained resources without producing results. We had let go of 12 people in that first week, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity because the company had been overstaffed with Marcus's friends and former fraternity brothers from his days at Princeton, guys who showed up late and left early and spent most of their time planning their next ski trip to Aspen or their next golf weekend in Scottsdale. The remaining employees, the ones who actually cared about doing good work, responded to the changes with cautious optimism, and I made a point of walking the floors every afternoon, talking to people and learning their names and asking about their projects, because my grandmother had taught me that you can't lead people you don't know. North Star Financial made good on their promise, signing a new 5-year contract worth $48 million that included expanded services and quarterly performance reviews that would keep us honest and accountable. I had flown to their headquarters in Chicago for the signing, sitting across from their CEO, Patricia Walsh, in a conference room overlooking Lake Michigan, while we ate deep dish pizza from Lou Malnati's and talked about the future of business consulting in an age when artificial intelligence was changing everything. Patricia told me she had always suspected I was more than just Marcus's girlfriend, said she had watched me at industry events asking smart questions and making connections that seemed too strategic to be accidental, and she admitted that when she heard about the acquisition, her first reaction had been relief that someone competent was finally taking control. 2 other major clients followed North Star's lead, and by the end of the second week, we had secured enough new business to stabilize the company's finances and start planning for actual growth instead of just survival. But at night when I went home to my penthouse and heated up leftover Thai food from that place on 9th Avenue that stayed open until 2 in the morning, I felt hollow in ways I hadn't anticipated. The victory had come with a price that I was only beginning to calculate, and that price was paid in sleepless nights and moments of doubt that hit me at 3 in the morning when the city was as quiet as it ever got, and I lay in bed wondering if I had done the right thing or if I had just become the same kind of ruthless person I claimed to despise. My therapist, Dr. Morrison, told me during our sessions that what I was experiencing was a normal response to major life changes, that revenge rarely felt as good as people imagined it would, that real satisfaction came from building something meaningful rather than tearing someone else down. I had started seeing her twice a week instead of once, sitting in her office with its view of the Hudson River and its collection of abstract art that was supposed to be calming, talking through my feelings about Marcus and the relationship, and whether I had loved him or just loved the idea of being loved by someone successful. The hardest part was that I still missed him sometimes, missed the version of him that had existed in my head if not in reality, missed lazy Sunday mornings eating bagels from Russ and Daughters and reading the Times in bed, missed having someone to call when I saw something funny or interesting or strange. My friends, the ones who had stuck around through my relationship with Marcus despite their reservations, threw me a celebration dinner at this Italian place in the West Village where we drank too much Chianti and ate pasta until we could barely move. My best friend Rachel, who worked as a public defender in Brooklyn and who had never liked Marcus, raised her glass and said she was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. But even as I clinked my glass against hers, I felt a sadness that I couldn't quite articulate. Part of me had wanted Marcus to fight harder, to contest the acquisition in court, or to at least try to explain himself or apologize. But he had simply disappeared, moved out of the apartment we had shared, and according to mutual acquaintances had left New York entirely, maybe heading back to his parents' place in Connecticut, or maybe just driving until he ran out of road. 3 months after the gala, Apex Industries had transformed into something I barely recognized, and I meant that in the best possible way. We had brought in fresh talent from companies like Deloitte and Bain, young, hungry consultants who actually cared about their clients and who weren't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom. I had restructured the company's approach to focus on mid-sized businesses in emerging markets, the same companies that the big consulting firms ignored because they weren't prestigious enough or profitable enough, and that strategy was paying off in ways that surprised even me. Our quarterly earnings had increased by 37%. Our client satisfaction scores had jumped from 62% to 89%, and Forbes had published a profile about me titled, "The Anonymous Investor Who Became an Industry Disruptor," with a photo of me in the office looking confident and competent and nothing at all like the pretty face Marcus had dismissed. I started a mentorship program called Women in Consulting that paired young female professionals with experienced executives, meeting monthly at our office for workshops and networking sessions over catered food from local restaurants, because I believed in supporting small businesses. The first session had attracted 42 women ranging from recent college graduates to mid-career professionals looking to break through the glass ceiling that still existed in so many industries. And listening to their stories reminded me why I had gone through everything with Marcus, why the humiliation and the heartbreak had been necessary steps on a journey towards something bigger than revenge. One woman named Sarah Chen told me she had been working at a consulting firm where her male colleagues constantly talked over her in meetings and took credit for her ideas, and she asked me how I had found the courage to stand up for myself. I told her the truth, that courage wasn't something you found, but something you built through small acts of defiance, and through surrounding yourself with people who saw your worth even when you struggled to see it yourself. The company's stock price, which had been trading at $42 per share when I took over, had climbed to $68 by the end of the quarter, making my 51% stake worth approximately $89 million on paper. My investment in Apex had gone from what Marcus would have called a foolish gamble to one of the most successful acquisitions of the year, and business publications were calling me for interviews and asking me to speak at conferences about my investment strategy and my approach to corporate leadership. I accepted some of these opportunities and declined others, learning to navigate the balance between visibility and privacy, between sharing my story and protecting the parts of myself that weren't for public consumption. At a conference in Boston, I shared a panel with 3 other female CEOs, and afterward, during the reception, a young woman approached me holding a glass of white wine and told me my story had inspired her to start her own business. She said she had been in a relationship where her partner constantly diminished her ideas and made her feel small, and hearing about how I had taken control of my own narrative gave her the courage to leave and bet on herself. 6 months after the gala, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize, and when I answered, it was Marcus. His voice sounded different, smaller somehow, stripped of the confidence and bravado that had once defined him. He said he was calling from his parents' house in Greenwich, where he had been living since leaving New York, working with a career counselor and trying to figure out his next move. He didn't apologize exactly, but he came close, saying he had done some thinking about how he treated me, and that he realized he had never really seen me as a partner, but as a supporting character in his own story. I listened without interrupting, standing at my office window watching the sun set over the Hudson River, and when he finished talking, I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity, just a vast emptiness where strong feelings used to live. I told him I appreciated him calling, but that I had moved on, that I hoped he would learn from this experience and treat the next woman in his life with more respect. And then I ended the call and blocked his number, because I didn't need that connection anymore. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and comment below with the phrase "she won" by rising above, because I love hearing your thoughts and support. By the time 9 months had passed, I had stopped thinking about Marcus entirely, except as a cautionary tale I sometimes shared with my mentees about the importance of knowing your worth. Apex Industries had become one of the fastest growing consulting firms in the Northeast. We had opened new offices in Boston and Philadelphia, and I was in talks to acquire a smaller firm in Atlanta that specialized in healthcare consulting. My personal life had settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Dinner with friends on Wednesdays, yoga classes on Saturday mornings at that studio in Chelsea, where everyone was too focused on their own practice to care about networking. Long walks through Central Park on Sunday afternoons, when the weather was nice enough to make me remember why I loved this impossible, expensive, beautiful city. I went on a few dates with people I met through friends or through business connections, a venture capitalist named James who was nice but talked too much about his portfolio, a doctor named Michael who worked at Mount Sinai Hospital and who had kind eyes but no chemistry, and I realized I was okay being alone for a while, that I didn't need a relationship to validate my existence or give my life meaning. The real turning point came when I was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference at the Javits Center, one of those massive events with thousands of attendees and keynote speakers who were supposed to inspire and motivate and change lives. I stood backstage listening to my introduction being read, hearing my accomplishments listed in a way that made them sound more impressive than they felt from the inside. And when I walked out onto that stage and saw all those faces looking up at me with hope and expectation, I understood that my story wasn't just mine anymore. I talked about being underestimated and dismissed and called useless, but I also talked about the danger of seeking revenge for its own sake, about how the goal wasn't to destroy someone else, but to build yourself into someone whose success made other people's opinions irrelevant. I told them about my grandmother and her Brooklyn brownstone and her letter about refusing to be made small, and I saw women in the audience nodding and wiping their eyes and writing notes like I was saying something they needed to hear. After the speech, I stood in the hallway signing books and taking photos, and a woman in her 50s approached me with tears streaming down her face. She said she had spent 30 years in a marriage where her husband constantly told her she was too stupid to understand business, where she had believed his assessment of her capabilities and had made herself small to fit his vision of what a wife should be. She said my story had given her the courage to go back to school at 48 to get her MBA, and she had just accepted a job offer as CFO of a mid-sized manufacturing company in Ohio, and she wanted to thank me for showing her that it was never too late to rewrite your own narrative. We hugged right there in the hallway while conference attendees walked around us, and I felt something shift inside me, some final piece of anger or resentment dissolving like sugar in hot tea. That night, I sat in my penthouse eating pizza from John's of Bleecker Street and looking out over the city, all those lights representing all those lives, all those people fighting their own battles and nursing their own wounds and dreaming their own dreams. I thought about calling Rachel or my mother or someone to share how I was feeling, but instead I just sat there in the quiet darkness feeling something that might have been peace, or might have been acceptance, or might have been the understanding that revenge had never been the point. The point was becoming someone who didn't need revenge, because she had built something so solid and so true that other people's cruelty couldn't touch it. I pulled out my phone and looked at the last photo I had of Marcus and me together, taken at some charity gala a year ago when I still believed in us, and then I deleted it without ceremony or regret. The next morning, I had meetings with potential investors from Singapore, and a lunch with a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, and an afternoon session with my mentorship group, and I was ready for all of it, ready to keep building and growing and showing up as the fullest version of myself.